Welcome. Please, take a moment and get comfortable. You have time. If you're just joining us, welcome. Please, take a moment and allow yourself to get comfortable. We have time. Before we begin, a few suggestions to have an optimal experience. Please, if they're available to you, wear headphones. We suggest over-the-ear headphones, but earbuds will do. Please take a moment and put your mobile device on Do Not Disturb. If you haven't already, take a moment and change your view on whatever device you're watching this on to full screen. The experience will begin shortly. And now let's just take a moment to breathe at whatever pace you want. You choose. This is for you. This is all for you. This is for you. This is all for you. This is for you. This is all for you. We will begin shortly.
Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath y déjalo ir. Listen to my voice as we go back to the start, to battles fought by ancestors, to dreams fulfilled by sweat and tears. Take a deep breath as we go back to people fighting for freedom, into journeys destined to never end. We take a deep breath as we all go to the promised land, as our wishes excel a new dawn. We take a deep breath as we all walk somewhere with our faces held high, with our hearts exposed, with our souls vibrating in unison as we always become take a deep breath. Where are we heading towards? when the night lights up our needs for connection? Where are we heading towards? In the solitude of our heads, when we push through flesh and heart, when the needle and the bottle numb our angst, where are we heading today? Take a deep breath. We move through hallways of desire. We're slowly pacing towards the end, focused on the finish line of humankind. We all become, and we all hurt. We all ache. But when we feel the call of earth, shaking and shuddering, filling our lungs with air, shouldn't we put our aches to rest? Take a deep breath. We are all eternal. May you take a deep breath. We've been all walking this journey, sailing then sinking. We submerge in the laughter of our mothers. In our own memories, we can still prevail. So I take a deep breath. When we fill our needs with more desires, we content with our own violence. We become lost in our own aggressions. We forget to listen to our ancestors calling us out of deep waters. When we walk from the darkness into the light, when we walk from the darkness into the new light, the light we have always owed to ourselves, we take a deep breath and we hold. I hear my body aching, filled with broken promises, intertwined with broken bones, caged in desire, caged in the past. So I take a deep breath. Then I can hear my body aching and my soul screaming loud as my lungs fill with dusty air from the land where I become. I can hear my soul scream. When the body aches, when your heart breaks, let the water take all pain away. Let your mother put your worries to rest.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome tonight for this open studio. We just got a little teaser from the artists in residence of the Create Change program. Thank you for joining us. My name is Atuey Ramos Fermin. I'm Director of Programs at the Laundromat Project, pronouns he, him, his. And we're here today for our first Create Change residency open studios of the year. So we'll have more as we go by. So we have the House of Dust as part of our program tonight. So for more information, you can go on our website, laundromatproject.org. And I'll just take a moment to talk about our organization, a little bit about our program, and I'll hand it over to the guests tonight. So very excited to be here. So the Laundromat Project, we're an arts organization that advances artists and neighbors as change agents in their own communities. We do this through our Create Change Artists in Residence and fellowship programs, as well as creative community engagement, building initiatives, and public programs as well. So, and just a little bit about Create Change, which is what we're gathered here tonight. Create Change is the Laundromat Project's flagship annual artist development program, including a fellowship and artist residency that supports learning community of artists who are invested in developing critical community-based practice via workshops, coaching, guest speakers, peer support system, and among other things. So just a little bit about our organization and just some things for tonight. Questions should be on the chat. If you can do that, we'll populate the chat and gather the questions towards the end. So there's a moment for answering questions. Let's see, we'll keep things muted for now. So we'll have a conversation later on. And so also one thing, there's closed captions available at the bottom of the screen. If you go to the your menu downstairs, you can actually take a look at that if you need that. Just making sure that that's available to you, and also so that you know we're recording this public program, which eventually will go on our YouTube site. So if you would like to, if you're not interested in being seen, make sure you keep your camera off for that. So I appreciate your patience and your understanding. So now we'll do a land acknowledgement. And the Laundromat Project respectfully acknowledges that we're in Brooklyn. This is where our base is. The occupied and unceded lands of the Canarsie, who are part of the Munsee Lenape. We recognize them as the original stewards of this land and pay respects to their elders past, present, and future. We acknowledge that and offer deep gratitude to this Lenape land that supports us as we gather here right now together. And I invite you to join me in that acknowledgement, and also wherever you might be, to acknowledge the land where you are. That respect and with gratitude. And now we'll take a moment to talk about our open studios. Just to give you a little bit of context, is something that we started a couple of years ago as an opportunity to share the work that's currently in progress. What you saw earlier today was a little bit of a glimpse of work in progress by artists in residence. And the idea is that you can get a chance to look at the process, at the practices, and the things that are informing their work as the work and the year progresses. So you'll get to experience the work later on. So this is a nice sneak preview of that. And it's with great pleasure that I would like to introduce the artist and our moderator for tonight. So we have Gabriel Torres. He's a multidisciplinary artist from Colombia and New York. He has directed shows and readings in Hong Kong, Colombia, and New York. Gabriel also works in education and community organizing. He holds a BA in liberal science, and he's candidate for an MA in media studies, both at the New School. He's part of the Emerge NYC's 20 and Creative Capital Taller Profesional para Artistas. Gabriel is collaborating this year with producer Aaron Salazar and marketing and development director Kristen Kelso. And they're doing the project House of Dust. And they will be hosting a series of workshops and town halls in the upcoming months. To learn more, please visit their website, iamdust.org. And they'll be in conversation facilitated by Richard Morales as manager of community partnerships at the LGBT Center. Richard, from Brooklyn and of Puerto Rican descent, is currently the manager of community partnerships of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Community Center, this center, where he curates their art, exhibits, and cultural programming. Prior to joining the center, he was the manager of public programs and engagement at the Museo del Barrio, where he sourced Latinx and Latin American artists and scholars to create robust series of programming that engage the community in interactive experiences. This is an incredible array of folks here tonight. We're very excited. There's more to this, but I wanted just to turn over the mic to Richard and the House of Dust team, so they will tell you more about their project. And thank you for being here tonight. And I hope you have a great evening. So with further ado, Richard and the team.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Atue. Thank you, Laundromat Project, for inviting me to be a part of this project. And of course, thank you to Gabriel and the House of Dust team for inviting me to moderate this conversation. I know as a manager of community partnerships at the center, we've been working with Gabriel on a couple of projects, and this being the most recent one with the House of Dust. And so I am excited to talk a little bit about this to you all in this space, because Gabriel and I have been talking about this for some time now. So Gabriel, I just want to start with the obvious question and just talking about what House of Dust is and how it came to be. And then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I everybody is here. So House of Dust is a campaign we're launching.
You sound a little low on my end here, just to let you know, Gabriel.
Okay, give me. Is it better now?
Perfect.
Thank you. So House of Dust is a project that happens to be a campaign with 3 different activations, and we're hoping to create a space to bring awareness on substance use in Latinx queer communities. We are going to be having an immersive theatrical experience that will happen over the summer in the city. Then we're going to be building a garden for the community, and we're also going to be creating a game that happens over 15 minutes. You can play it in 15 minutes to create anxiety relief and cravings release. The project came to be because I used to struggle with meth use. I struggled with meth use for a very long time. And I had an opportunity at the end of my undergrad to create a story that was based on my personal story. And I wanted to find a way of understanding why I couldn't move on from utilizing the drugs when I knew that they were taking a toll on me. So I wrote a show about my experience, like every other theater artist does, I guess. And then from that, this whole journey started.
And so when you think about this and you start, I know we've had a couple of conversations around like the issues of substance abuse, impact on community. You know, my question would be in terms of like, how do you feel a project like this creates space for people that are experiencing substance abuse, have known individuals that have experienced substance abuse, and want to provide resources for friends that they may have or know that are close to that?
Yes, I think for that, I have to talk a little about myself. I think before I utilized meth, I didn't know what the drug was. And after doing some research, now that I've been involved in making this project, I found out that this also happens because meth is not as easily accessible in South America as it is in other areas. And also because if I truly think about my family, I was educated on other substances, but I never heard what it was. And then suddenly I found myself in New York, where there's a social pressure inside of the community to utilize the substance, and I end up using it without knowing what it was. Saying all of this to say, I think that awareness and education for the Latinx community, for immigrants to come into the United States is very important. And I hope that the project is able to create space in different ways. As a theater artist, I've been struggling a lot the past 2 years in thinking about how we create stories only for the sake of representation, but we don't create a bridge between the stories that we talk about and then resources, factual resources back to the social issues that we're talking about. So the first aspect is bringing awareness to the show. And then we're hoping with the garden to create a space where it can be a sanctuary for people that are recovering from substances instead of just having to go through the system in order to get the resources that they need to get better. And then with the game, we hope that in the future, it's going to take a while to realize the game, but we hope that the game can be a tool in the moment that can serve to people as they go through their recovery.
Thank you for being so frank and open also about your own recovery process and your experiences with substances and substance abuse. I know it's definitely not something that's easily or easy to talk about. And especially as we're looking at ourselves in a pandemic, I think we've seen an increase in people that are abusing substances, whether it's alcohol abuse or other illicit drugs. I think being in a pandemic doesn't help, especially if we're looking at what the road to recovery is, which varies from person to person. It's not always going to be a clear-cut example. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how the creation of this in a way was like your own road, not just to addressing your issues with recovery, but kind of the information that you also got access to as a result. Part of this isn't just like coming from you, it's also coming from statistics, right? And coming from statistical information. I know for us at the center, we've seen an increase, for instance, of people that are in need of these services where it's increased over 40% from what we were offering in person, due to the fact that we're also able to provide these opportunities online or in these kind of virtual settings. And so in the research that you did for this project to support the script or to support your own knowledge of the topic, what were you finding in terms of that?
Yes. One of the first findings that I had was on a conversation with the Latino AIDS Commission, in which they told me that they were experiencing a lack of funding to be able to provide resources in Spanish, and that they felt this happened because funding for meth use was rarely available for Latinx communities, that Latinx communities are normally profiled as communities that are struggling with opiums, and that was creating a gap between, as I was saying, the fact that there are so many immigrants that come into the United States and they don't have access or knowledge about what the drug is. More than talking about data, I think I can talk a little about my experience and the people that I know around me who are also struggling with the substance. I personally think at this moment that, at least for myself, it all comes down to connection and to being in a space that creates wellness and that allows you to take care of yourself and have relationships that give you nutrients and that truly allow you to grow. And when thinking about all of this and thinking about immigrants in the United States and my own journey as an immigrant, I feel that the pandemic, as well as all of the journey and the social pressure that we go through in order to survive, to work, to do so many things, does not really allow a space for people to really take care of themselves when it comes to recovery, especially when they don't know that they have gotten involved with the drug that now they're hooked on, as it was my experience. I've certainly throughout the past year, I've heard more about, unfortunately, about more friends that are having overdoses or that have relapsed and never gotten out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's definitely something that I wanted to ask about in terms of queer Latinx communities and how the impact that you are addressing in that. And it definitely got that feeling from looking at the script, and even what you mentioned regarding the connection was something that kept coming up over and over in the script itself. And also just the title, of the House of Dust and what that means. I'm butchering this by saying it. It's like when from dust we came from dust will return, or something like that. And so it was just kind of like a very interesting play on words with regards to that, to think of the concept or the idea that we're inhaling the same breath that the prehistorics inhaled, right? And just making the connection time-wise between those kinds of civilizations. I definitely feel like that um, came across in your script and in your writing. And when we talk about the immigrant experience, I know you mentioned a lot of references, and even in the video, you've shown references to your family and to the connection that you've had with them. How have they been in terms of supporting you throughout this process and the creation of that? Because I know you're also currently in Colombia right now with them. So how has this been, and how has that influenced the writing itself? And what were some of the writings or the inspirations for the scripts?
Yes. Oof, that's a really good question. I came into Colombia because I felt that I had lost connection to my roots and to my ancestry. And I am also very privileged in the fact that I am documented in the United States. So I know that is not the fact of a lot of my other friends when thinking about substances and the things that I'm able to achieve or not based on my privilege. Um, I think going back into my life, thinking about substances, I think there was a moment where in New York, I got so caught up inside of consuming meth that nothing else mattered and nothing else made sense. And I forgot about everything else. And in that journey, there was a part of me that forgot about where I came from and the things that were important to me and the connections that were important to me. And my family found out that this happened because I overdosed and I was in coma in a bed. I think if that hadn't happened, my family wouldn't have found out completely what was going on. And there was a lot of social pressure and a lot of judgment, and a lot of need and desire to clearly communicate between us so that we could figure out what was the best for me and for support for the family as they had to support me. And now that I'm here in Colombia and that I'm able to reconnect myself with my true bonds, with my true connections, with my ancestry, with where I come from and the things that matter to me, I'm starting to realize that it just feels as if in the process of utilizing the drugs, something was lost in translation that I had to get back in order to move forward. And my family, well, they don't completely understand what is going on. And I happen to have a very Catholic family. They've tried their best to create space for me so that I could recover. And I know that this is not the opportunity of everybody. So this is on a longer term, what I hope that this project can achieve is to create a family, to create a network, so that people can create those connections and feel that they have a sanctuary to come to.
I think that would be a perfect segue into the family that you've created as a result of this project and the team that you have involved. So perhaps we can talk about Aaron and Kelso's role in this. So I would love to move into that part of the conversation since we're on this topic of like the community that you were able to connect. And then I want to follow up with some other questions that I had specific to you, but I think it's open to pretty much everyone in the space. Sound cool?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear from you both, Aaron and Kelso, about your involvement in this project and how it came to be. So I'm just gonna go by first name alphabetical order. So Aaron, why don't we start with you?
So I came to the project from a colleague that GT is my nickname for him, that we both know. and she was saying, "Hey, I'm looking for an immersive theater producer uh, that, you know, dot dot dot." And I was really excited to jump on board once I heard about it. And also too, it's like in the immersive community, there's really a lack of diversity, kind of like in most theater. So I was very excited to jump on board with my Latinx brothers and sisters and be able to start this journey and help to form the immersive experience that the show is going to be. That's one prong of the project.
And I hearing some feedback from one theater. I want to ask about that too, because I know in one of our conversations we talked about the lack of diversity in immersive theater. And one, for people that don't know what immersive theater is, can you give us a little brief synopsis about that? And two, how is it in this particular genre that representation matters? How did you see that play out in terms of that?
Well, immersive theater, I mean, it's been around forever. I mean, that's the real truth of that. And actually, interestingly enough, it was a Brazilian artist who really brought it to New York City. I don't know how long people have been in New York, but there was a show called De La Guarda and Fuerza Bruta that Dickie James brought over. Daryl Roth brought him over. And that was kind of, I always call that like sort of like the grandfather immersive experience where you went into this blank space and then the entire experience is engulfed around you. So I guess succinctly, immersive theater is something where you are actively within the experience. And sometimes that might have a linear plot line, sometimes it might not. Of recent years, that's one of the things I explore in my work as a director with my company is like I like words. A lot of immersive theater has been dance based. And so I'd say in probably the last 10 years, there's been a real renaissance of immersive theater. And I think frankly, I think a lot of it's coming out of lack of resources are creating opportunities for scrappy artists to be like, okay, hey, we're going to find this space and we're going to create something within it. And I think a lot of that has to come from the scrappy nature of just artists not having rent for traditional theater. And I fell into immersive theater by accident that way. And I really like it because I find it's an interesting way to almost gently coerce people into a theater experience that they might not know they're going to because they're going to a cool experience. And in terms of diversity, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My show in 2019 when the world was open got a bunch of press, and it came to my attention as I was researching it that I was one of the only Latin directors in that field um, at all. And so that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Then the pandemic um, kicked in, and so that's why this opportunity to come in and help shepherd this production has been really a delight, and I'm really thrilled about the opportunity about it. But it's definitely, much like a lot of what's happening in theater in general, there is a definitive lack of diversity, and I'd say more so over not so much on the front facing part of it, but in particular on the back end of the creative teams. I can safely say that it's fairly monolithic in terms of lack of diversity.
Yeah, I have definitely seen some of that play out in some like what Latino theater is, right? Always approached from the standpoint of it has to be like salsa music or very niche oriented, that the concept of like immersive theater or avant-garde art theater is like,
Well, and it's also funny because immersive theater rides this fine line that I certainly, it's going to be a journey. It's this fine line of being a little too, it's too indie for commercial theater, and it's sometimes too commercial for indie theater. But the truth of the matter is, the one thing I will say about the immersive community is that it really is a group of people who are getting together to put on a show. So that spirit of like strolling players stick together, that really I think is what makes all artists who work in live experiences want to work together. It really is about that notion of like, let's put on a show. But yeah, I agree. It's like I think there needs to be more agency available to artists of color to be able to create interesting experimental experiences and be allowed the option to succeed and fail like our white counterparts and not be chastised for it. And I think that's one thing that this medium sort of offers is the opportunity to experiment and to succeed or fail.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think of all these like founding organizations like Teatro Campesino and some of these like more like street-based theater or DIY theater organizations. It's it's interesting to see how within this pandemic, how creatives are being innovative in that way, utilizing technology in a way to create similar experiences online, even though we're not able to do that in person. Um, we'll talk a little bit about that too, but Kelso, I'd love to hear about how you got involved in this.
Yes, hello. Um, Also, just want to apologize in advance, just in case I had to move locations last minute for this panel because there's some unexpected construction going on inside my apartment. So I was trying to avoid that disruption, but I think the internet here has been kicking me out of the meeting a couple times. So I always come back, but if I disappear for a second, you know why. Um, so hi, yeah, so I met Gabriel when I did, he and I were both a part of the Emerge NYC residency program with the formerly with the Hemispheric Institute in 2020. And it was a very interesting experience because the whole thing was online, of course. It was right at the onset of COVID. And we connected over a lot of similar artistic models and ways of thinking and ways of being. And then he told me about this project and asked me if I'd like to come on board because I have a little bit of experience in marketing and development and other nonprofit organizations, mainly in Texas. And we also had connected about artistic experiences in Texas. And he asked me to come on board, and I said absolutely. In my other work, I am a translator and a writer and an actor and a director. And so was very, very interested in learning more about creative making and the intersections of community engagement and artistry. And so that's how it was just a very simple ask. And we had already sort of been collaborating on other grants for with other of our cohort members from the residency. So it was just kind of a good fit.
Thank you for that. I'm curious about the translation bit. I grew up speaking both Spanish and English, and oftentimes when I was a kid, had to go serve as an interpreter for my mom in hospitals. And so, you know, I had a very rudimentary introduction to how I translate things. But I'm curious about how you've applied some of these kind of methods in this particular work. You know, if you can walk us through like maybe some like core concepts when we think about translation work and how you apply that in your own work, and in this case to House of Dust and this theater performance piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to translation. Let's see, I started speaking and learning Spanish when I was 5. I'm from Georgia. None of my family speaks another language. I just found, I was very interested in it, and I kind of fell in love with the language and culture, and really wanted to kind of integrate that into my life to just continue learning more. So I started translating in undergrad when I was trying to mesh my love of Spanish literature and then theater. And so I started writing bilingually. And so I'm primarily a literary translator, and kind of taking like a very I like to kind of refuse a linear model of translation, because when starting out, it's, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I don't think you have to be completely trained to be a translator, because I think we're always translating. Like, I think we translate to be translated. And like you just said, there's so many people that live in this constant translational mode. It's a deconstructive mode, I think, where you're constantly searching for meaning and trying to fill the gaps. So in my work, I like to think of it as a constant, because I like to do also bilingual pieces. I like to find that in between and kind of live in that. I think of it as a constant negotiation of loss, but the loss is a necessary one, because it's also very productive, and then something is born anew. And I think that there's so much about that sort of methodology, because I think of a lot about loss and grief within that is also correlates to this project. Because as Gabriel has already talked about, he saw a lot of gaps. He saw the gaps. And this project is about trying to fill the gaps, not only with bilingual resources, as a practical methodology and as a practical way for access, but also just aesthetically and within the artistic pieces themselves. It's all about living in that in between. And it's all about kind of thinking through and moving through the things that we've lost to find what's ahead. And I also think a lot of it is about letting go, because you have to let go of a lot in translation. It's never going to be perfect, but that's okay. So I think of translation as a performative practice. I lived in the literary practice for a long time, and then I really wanted to take it and kind of figure out how it can be embodied and what are the ways that we can talk about it being embodied. And I think that it's embodied in so many people just living their lives every day in a constant mode of code switching as well. Because it's also, not only is it something that like people do for, well, fun or art, but it's also a mode of survival. So.
Thank you for that. And perhaps I do want to talk a little bit more about what you just said, because I agree that translation is like an interpretation, right, to an extent of and there's always this play of like word hierarchy, which word you choose over the other, and all these choices that need to be made. I'm curious about the choices that you all made from a design perspective, because there is a particular feel to the piece. There's a lot in the script that's painting these environments in kind of like these neon like colors, and even just the aesthetics from your social media graphics has this very kind of like dark but sexy chic, yet we know we're going to talk about some deep shit here, but there's something about it that's enticing. So how did you all get to this point about making these pieces?
I can answer a little to that. I think, well, my writing is always connected to rituals and transcendence. Really interested in translation and transcendence and grief and loss, and what happens when we have to forget a part of ourselves and then move forward into another part, or what are the journeys that we go through from one cycle to the next one. In the piece itself, we encounter 10 souls that are in an open mic in a bar called the Abysm, which is between the world of the living and the dead. And these souls come to this place to say their last words before they're able to move on. The things that they've been hanging on to based on their overdose or based on their experiences with some substances and addiction. And then with all of that, then it ends up happening that a guide takes them into the journey to be able to transcend, and we are left with a young character called G, which is me, and this character is letting us know that all of this is inside of their heads. So there's a lot of aspects of all of this meta and connection with what is ritual and spiritual. And then there is a specific aspect to plants and earth, reason why as well we're connecting this with the garden. I also talk a lot about the use of South American plants and turned into chemicals. That's like the story itself and the way that it came to be. You were mentioning before dust and the connection with everything is dust and we're all dust and we're in communion and we all going to turn the little parts of the whole universe. So I had this really condensed, dense, difficult to swallow sometimes story. And then when we started to brainstorm on how it could become an immersive piece, Aaron brought some ideas. So I'll let him talk about the sexiness and the appeal of it, which I also think is connected not only to making the story into an immersive piece, but also thinking about how we're going to be able to reach the people that we want to reach to come and see the show, which is another aspect of this. How are we going to engage with people who are utilizing substances and who can take the most out of the story and at the same time invite people to hear something really heavy and want to participate in a way that is smooth and that it's fun.
I don't know if Aaron was going to speak.
Aaron.
Oh yeah, sure. So first of all, Richard, that just made, you saw we all smiled. That just made my night. What you said about the logo. So the other thing I'm doing with the piece is I came in to brand it, and to piggyback on what GT is saying. So my favorite part is tricking people into coming to something heavy because that's most theater. I mean, the essence of theater is generally like, a really good play, some tragedy happens, someone dies, but you can't sell that on a Friday night. So it's that catch-22 of when I absorbed the story and then kind of meditated on it. And actually, our very first meeting we ever had, the three of us outside of a coffee shop, I immediately had a visual for like what I think it could look like. And just like you said, the whole like electric vibe of the piece is really what pushed me towards that neon sort of energy. And also, exactly, it's like the point of it is to be inviting and to have something that you are intrigued by that does have some kind of resonance to it aesthetically. And we talked about this, Richard, a little bit just off camera. I think it's very important as artists of color to for me, it's very important that we're not viewed as like DIY. Because the content isn't DIY, if that makes sense. And so something I really like to offer is creating a bit of like weight to aesthetic so that people kind of look at it and, like you said, go, oh, what is this? What's going on here? And not just because, oh, that's cool, that's this, like, what is the energy of like this vibe, right? And the thing about this House of Dust experience is, yes, is it very intense? Of course. But, Sleep No More is Macbeth on like 17 floors. So like, that's no fun either. And everyone dies in the end. Sorry, spoiler everyone, if you haven't read the play. So, it's all drama and blah, 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 blah. And I think that's the thing with this piece that I'm so intrigued by is it has all this beautiful mythological, spiritual content. But at the end of the day, it's really, really cool. And I think sometimes we're afraid of that word, but it's not a bad thing to have that. And also, when you're trying to gently whisper an invitation to people who might be dealing with substance abuse, that's something where they need to be gently brought in and have an experience wash over them. I think you could come to this as an audience member and think to yourself, oh, that was really cool and intriguing. And I think that maybe someone who's actually dealing with addiction issues, it might hit them deeper. Do you know what I'm saying? But the first thing we have to do is get them in the door. And, I think the face of what people think people look like who are having problems with drug abuse isn't what we think. And oftentimes it is the person just going to get the cocktail at the bar. It is the person going to dinner. New York City is full of very high functioning addicts. And so the appeal of what the aesthetic is of the show is to feel inviting, to get people in and allow the mission of the experience to wash over you.
I will say a couple of things based on what you said. I definitely support the DIY aesthetic too. Just knowing like certain space, one, working in nonprofit, right? You oftentimes have to work on a very short shoestring budget, right? And I definitely don't get the feel based on some of these images that we are currently looking at of the installation at the Loisaida Center, some of the altars that will be a part of this as well. And, you know, it's it's definitely an aesthetic that I think a lot of us in the marginalized communities have worked to our advantage, you know, especially I'm thinking of like people involved in the ballroom scene where sometimes you don't have a red heart on your shirt. And I'm thinking of a heartbreak mini ball that we did at the center right before we closed in February, where the category was to like wear something with a heart on it. And someone from the audience wanted really to be involved. They grabbed the heart off the wall, put it on their shirt, and like gave it their 110%, right? So sometimes it's just also acknowledging that not everybody has the resources to, you know, put something up like Sleep No More, but you know, that if we're giving it our all and if our intentions are our 110, 20, 50%, that also speaks for itself too. And it definitely get a feel from these visuals that you're sharing with us, Gabriel, about, you know, just that amount of work that's being put into this and how many different layers are involved that are talking about something that you're right. It isn't something that's like, hey, it's Friday night, I want to go talk about addiction, right? But in a sense, it is something unique because I can't say off the top of my head, you know, plays that I have seen that have talked about it. If anybody here in the meeting space has any info on that, please feel free to drop it in the chat. But, you know, I'm curious to hear from you all about how you feel that this piece is talking about an addiction in a way that we haven't heard about or seen before.
Yes, I can. With the slides, if we could go back to the beginning. I think just condensing what you were talking with Aaron as well is we don't have a big budget, and we're working with what we have. But because I think because of my experience as somebody that works in community engagement and that since I was a teenager, I've been working with nonprofit organizations in cultural programming for communities. I really wanted to find a way of making the project happen as a creative placemaking project. I also think that's the reason why I'm here in this conversation inside of the Laundromat Project. And since we didn't have a lot of resources, the way that we were thinking about this was, well, we don't have a lot of resources. What if we are able to reach into people that can help us support the project happen? And how can we make the project happen? So even from the inception of the project is different from any other theatrical experience because we are engaging with the community from the beginning into the making of. And once we open the immersive experience, we are going to have a space where the show is going to be completely free and open to everybody, to the community to come and see it for a certain amount of nights. Some of the really cool things that have been happening with the project is, if we go to the next slide, is one of the partnership that we're doing with you, with the LGBT Center, in which we are going to be building shrines on site to address the fact that we're not able to have performers due to COVID. Everything is going to happen on video. We're going to have a visual, physical representation of the characters, which is a sanctuary for each of them. As well, we're going to be distributing a tutorial video for people to do a shrine in their house. Then we have a whole project that we created with Loisaida last year, which was muralizing the space of Loisaida, where the show is to be hosted at, in which we had community come in and help us make the murals of the space and create the environment of the show. And then we're hosting a chorus workshop that happens with the National Queer Theater. We had an itineration earlier last year, and we're going to have another itineration where our music director, who is also the person who created the music for the experience that you just watched, we'll be working with the community, and we will have people from the community perform inside of our show. That on the aspect of the show making. Then I think the other two parts that I'm really excited about is the fact that we are minding gaps of how through a story that we're activating in the summer, we are going to be creating resources for the community. Super excited to think about the garden. If we go 2 slides forward, which is going to be created with an amazing organization called OSS Project, which creates gardens in the housing authorities in the city and then brings them into sustainability for the community over the period of 3 years. And the idea is to build a sanctuary, a physical sanctuary for people going through recovery programs to do something else. And also for us to create some research on whether there are other methods of dealing with addiction. I know that I've been in conversation with the LGBT Center as well on this to see how we could make this happen. This is that you're watching here is some of the ideas that we have for the beds. We're going to be creating this beautiful tower where there's a sunflower that goes through the middle, and there are perennials in different beds. And then the other 2 beds that are going to be 6 beds, the other figures are for vegetables and for creating food for the community. And lastly, the game, which is, I think, is the longest project. It's gonna be the project that takes the longest to fulfill. But hopefully we're able to create something, again, with community partners that are helping us making it happen, where we can do something in the moment for people who are struggling with stress and cravings. I don't remember how many times it has happened that I've been at the brink of running into doing the substance because I have anxiety and I don't know how to cope with my problems in the moment. And if I'm able to provide or create something that can serve in any way, I'll be happy through, again, all of this happening through a theatrical experience. I think that's where the project really become innovative, is the fact that we are not thinking of stopping only with creating representation for subject matter and for my community, since I'm part of it, but we're thinking of how through the story we can amplify to do things in the moment and go into other sectors and create change.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the many layers of this project that really works and stands out, where you have something that kind of works for many people, right? I'd say that for me, as a gamer myself, I've definitely during this pandemic gravitated towards video games in a way that for me, many people were like, oh, that's stupid, but it grounded me to some extent, right? So it's great that there are different options for people to engage with this same type of work, is what I'm saying. I do want to open up the floor to any questions that we have from any of the audience members that are with us. So feel free to drop any in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, that's totally fine too. I will continue asking some more questions until we start getting those in our queue. But I know, we started having this talk last year about what the project was going to look like. Then we were like inching towards a potential in-person event. And obviously that changed at the end of the year. And here we are, right? So what has it been for all of you involved in this in terms of creating a work of theater or work of immersive theater during a pandemic, and what were some of the challenges you saw? How did things shift or change? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can start with that as well. I think when the project started, I was expanding too much, and I was thinking expanding too much because of the pandemic, and I had a lot of free time, and I was thinking of a lot of things at the same time. And then the world stops, and you have to take a step back, and you have to rethink things. And from the beginning of making the project, we have had to adjust as things go along. So in the beginning, we were going to have performers on site. Now we're thinking about everything happening in projections, as a film installation, as a planetarium. We were also hoping to start this in the fall, at the end of fall, the immersive experience, and we had to put a stop on it. I'm really grateful and happy to have not only Kristen and Aaron, but everybody else that has been in the team, because we have a lot of people that have been working on this from the beginning, be so resilient and open to keep on moving as time allows. And I also think that also comes from the process of COVID and this year, and learning that things must take time and that journeys can take more than we think that they're supposed to take. That's like my answer. Aaron, Kristen, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
I mean, much kind of like what I was saying earlier. I actually think sometimes restrictions tend to create cool ideas. So I will say I was coming off of my own adjustment to something that was online, and I think what's been very cool though about the restrictions we're having in terms of even social distancing, that has really shaped what the live experience will be. And so because of that, I think what's going to be kind of incredible is this very boutique, bespoke journey that you'll go on as an audience member almost by yourself, in a sense. It'll feel like you're by yourself. We'll say that much. So in a lot of ways, I think it's created a lot of problem solving that actually I think is going to make for a much more unique experience. So I think definitely the team, we've been trying to turn lemons into lemonade, for lack of better expression. For every little, wall that sort of falls in front of us, we're like, okay, well, let's break that down and maybe do this. And I think what's going to be the end result will be something that's actually going to end up being far more personal for the audience than maybe what it could have been if it was in a more traditional world, health wise.
Yeah, I think that can everyone hear me okay? Great. I think that we have kind of rolled with all of the punches, and some of them, we did. Some of them we were like, oh, okay, this is not going to work, or this, we have to kind of pivot a little bit. So, but I think it really is just kind of all about, like, if this project is about community, it was built with community in mind, for community, around community, and so it's also kind of listening to the community's needs, and respecting and responding to that, and being okay with plans changing, but then also just really holding on to the resources that we do have, because we've been so lucky to, even with the center and all of our other partners, it's just really developed in really incredible ways that I didn't even foresee when I first signed on. So I don't know if any of that made any sense, but that's what I have to say about it.
No, it did. It totally did. I think in even just like basing it on what you've already shared with us with your, community engagement work, your outreach work, it's definitely, anyone that works in community knows this, that it's like, if you are a community-based arts center or you work in that kind of format, you definitely have to listen to what is going on around you and what your community's wants and needs are. Because if not, it's just like taking this hierarchical approach to programming, which I think can oftentimes be problematic and disingenuous, right? So, I agree 100% with everything that you said, and that's been shared with us here so far. So thank you. Opening it up to a couple more questions if anyone wants to, but if not, I will kind of ask this as a last question specifically to you, Gabriel, because I know that this is something that you actually started your script with regards to addressing the men in your life that have sexually and physically abused you, and you forgave them. So I'm just curious, and perhaps this can be open to everyone else on that's with us, but you know, what this whole process has taught you about forgiveness.
That's loaded in a beautiful way. Um, I think I'm a Christian boy. No matter what I do, I cannot get away from the Christianity of my family, and I think I was taught to always forgive others, but I was never taught to forgive myself for my own mistakes and for my own, yeah, for the things that I tried to do and that didn't work out. And this whole journey has taught me that I have to create space for myself to forgive myself in order to be able to truly digest and forgive others. And then that, at least in my own experience and in my own life, is that I'm today the person that I am based on everything that has happened, everything, and things that I wish that had never happened, things that have shaped me as I am today. So taking pride on my own journey, taking pride on my own path through the earth has been also part of this reclaiming who I am and reconnecting with who I am and restructuring who I am. Um, it's a very important part, I think, of the whole process and the whole show and the journey, and it happens inside of the play. The play ends with um, G coming into a ritual and reconnecting, saying, now I can move forward. I think he has taught me that forgiveness is looking into the future, if that makes sense, like looking into the future and knowing where you stand in your present. That's like my answer to that. And understanding that forgiveness is Christian boy thinking about others, but forgiveness ends up not being about others, but ends up being about myself, so that I'm able to open up space more than about them. It's about myself. Yeah. I do want to know, to let you all know, if you like the conversation and you like the project, please follow us, help us spread the word. We're also looking for more support to be able to create the garden and finish the game. We have a classic page that has been shared in our chat, and I'm truly looking forward to be able to share the project with everybody once it's all tied up and ready to be out into the world.
Thank you, Gabriel, for sharing that. I'm leave that open. I know I said it was for you specifically, but you know, I'd love to hear, you know, from Kristen, Aaron, you know, what for you this process has taught you with regards to, I know we talked about loss, we talked about gains, we talked about challenges, but what has this taught you about forgiveness, especially as we look into what is, you know, our futures coming up, you know?
Yeah, I think that, because I'm thinking through just forgiveness and in my own life, and it's inextricably linked with healing, and of course, and I think that this project tackles a lot of alternative ways to heal, and really gives space for other ways of knowing and being, and for a lot of people that perhaps have needed that for a long time but haven't really found the resources to do that. So yeah, I think that it's opened my eyes to a lot of new ways of healing and new ways of thinking through healing, especially because that is at the forefront of a lot of our the messaging and the work, and honestly the reason, the intent. Because one of the first, we wanted to find ways to help heal the community, help this community heal.
Hmm.
So it's really, yeah, it's really beautiful. And I think there's a lot of, it's like a maze, and there's a lot of really wonderful entry points into the way that all of that works together.
Thank
I
you.
feel
I guess I'll add this. I think for me, what's been really interesting, like with the themes of like forgiveness and whatnot, is the big thing I realized during the pandemic was how much I was longing for community, if that means anything. Because like I think in New York, all of us working in everything we're doing, right? We have our head down so intently that we sometimes don't breathe. And I think this forced everyone to stop, and it made me realize a lot about myself as an artist and the kind of stories I want to give my time to. And also, weirdly, sort of putting out this radar that of wanting to find like-minded artists. And I really think that only in this pause would these connections have been able to really happen. And what I didn't realize I was so longing for is actually what this project is giving me, which is like a sense of community, like with GT and Kelso and the crew, and like basically being like his grumpy older uncle all the time, but like really having that familial connection that actually that's art, like being alive is art, and I mean that might sound a little like meh, meh, but it's it's been really amazing to work with these young people like who are already so comfortable in their skin, because it only like solidified like what was missing from my work as an artist, and I'm just like super grateful to have community, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that totally does. I mean, especially with this kind of art form, right? Where it's there. I think last year we were looking at like everything's going on Zoom, everything's going online, and there were things that weren't translatable in that way, and I think the more we get comfortable with the technology and the tools around us, the more we do have the opportunity to really push this forward in a way that makes it accessible also to audience members or individuals that might not be based in the city that or the place that you are producing this work at. And this is definitely something that I think we'll be seeing a bit more of. I don't think we're gonna get rid of these kinds of meeting spaces. If anything, I think we'll integrate them a bit more into our way of working and our way of collaborating. And, I think in terms of making things a little bit more accessible to wider audiences, has an opportunity to kind of widen the impact for projects like this, for organizations like the Laundromat Project, the Center, everybody that's been involved in this one particular work, right? So imagine that multiplied by 10, 20 people. So, you know, Gabriel, and to all of you, thank you for sharing all of this information. We've been getting a lot of love here in the chat, but I definitely want to say to you, Gabriel, you have a support system, this, and we'll probably chat later about this too, that I'm grateful that you're here with us and that you're talking about this in a way that could perhaps allow other people to bring that or bring these stories to light, because I think oftentimes they're kept in the dark. So thank you. With that, I'll pass it on to the Laundromat Project.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much, Gabriel, Aaron, and Kristen. This has been wonderful and insightful and so moving, and all the complexities about this project. So I appreciate all of that, and your rich conversation. It's been really, really great. We'll take more and digest and take more with that. And I hope that you're able to continue supporting the artists. This is why we're here, the LP. So keep connecting with us and Gabriel and the team with their projects. So one thing I want to say thank you also to the LP team that made today possible. Lady Sasha Jones, our Artist Engagement Manager, Ciabel Chicotenca, our Community Engagement Manager, Aisha Williams, our Deputy Director, Emma Colon, our Media and Storytelling Manager, and Julia Mata, Storyteller Fellow. And the rest of the team, want to thank you all for making this day possible. Also want to thank all our supporters and funders. Some of you are in the room, so I want to thank you for being here. And also thank you all for being here tonight. As you can see, there's several programs that will be upcoming in the next few weeks and months. You see them on the screen. So don't forget to follow us on social media and website and mailing list and all of that great stuff, so that you get to connect further with our work and the work of this amazing artist as the year progresses. So with that, I want to wish you all a wonderful and restful night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.